All right, guys, rolling on with our AL East previews, and as always, our annual guest, one of the pleasures I have every year to talk to Mr. Arden Zwelling of Sportsnet Toronto, to talk about the Toronto Blue Jays and really all the expectations that we can have around them. Give Arden a follow on the X. He's covering the team inside and out and has some really good perspective. So Arden, thanks man for coming on. Appreciate you and good seeing you.
A pleasure. Thanks for the intro. It's good to be back.
So the Blue Jays are a team. Well, first of all, I think the AL East is going to be extremely competitive this year. I think this has kind of been the case for the past few years, right? It's going into the season. We've all identified it as a competitive division. Maybe the Red Sox, withstanding. There's going to be, I think, a pretty healthy battle. And now that the Orioles are just really set as the favorite with a whole bunch of young guys with more to come up. Everybody's kind of chasing them now at this point. The Blue Jays are interesting because I think there's a storyline now, right? Like this core has been together for a bit. Unfortunately, you gave the Minnesota Twins a victory in the playoffs, which I wasn't happy that you did that. We were trying to keep that thing going, but I'm glad it didn't happen to the Yankees, if I'm being completely honest. But it's been, a road of getting swept in the wild card series. Like to me, then this is all about how do the Blue Jays now get over the hump with this core, take that next step, because the expectations have been there. But yeah, this is a year where they got to really get over that hump and take that next step into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's not that long ago that the Blue Jays were like this young up and coming team, right? No, here's Vladdy's debut, and Bo Bichette is coming into his own. And Alejandro Kirk has this great year as a catcher, and Alek Manoah is a Cy Young finalist. And you get old really quick in this league, and
it's crazy how fast it happens.
Right? Yeah, you go from that like trendy, sexy, up and coming team to kind of, are they that good? Like really quickly. But yeah, like a lot of that is like the Blue Jays have themselves to blame for that, right? Because they've squandered a lot of opportunities. You mentioned it, like 3 straight wild card exits getting swept. It goes back to 2020, right? The pandemic season. Yeah. When the Blue Jays got back to the playoffs when, at a time when, it was Vlad and Bo and a lot of these guys are really young in their careers. They go to the postseason swept by the Rays. And then a year later, they missed the postseason by a single game. Like that was the Marcus Semien, Robbie Ray year. And right. they missed the postseason by a game on the last day of the regular season. And then the year after that, they win 92 games and they come back and do really well. And what happens? They go to the wild card series, lose in 2 to Seattle. Then last year, as you mentioned, lost in 2 to Minnesota. So it's really been the theme of this camp is a lot of guys saying, look, we got to prove it. Like we're being doubted, and there's a reason why we're being doubted. We're not young anymore. It's time to stop talking about this and actually show up and get it done if we're going to be what people have believed that we can be.
So the offseason was interesting. Obviously, Chapman is one of the bigger names that wasn't re-signed. You got our guy, looks like he's going to be manning third base with IKF. What are your thoughts on what they've done in this offseason, and was it enough to take that next step?
It was a disappointing offseason for the Blue Jays, honestly. Like it's pretty underwhelming from the outside looking in, and I think that even internally they would be a little underwhelmed with what they came away with. Like the Blue Jays feel that they were the runners-up for Shohei Ohtani. I mean, they bid extremely aggressively on him, recruited him extremely aggressively right there until the 11th hour. We all know where he ended up going, but like the Blue Jays believe they finished second place in that competition. Had discussions with the Padres about Juan Soto, and everybody listening to this podcast knows where he ended up. Blue Jays weren't going to beat that package that the Yankees put together. And ended up going out and getting Isaiah Kiner-Falefa on a 2-year, $15 million deal that certainly, it was early in the market that they did that. And you look at Ahmed Rosario and Gio Urshela signing late in the market for $1.5 million for 1 year. And it kind of stands out as a bit of a head scratcher. Kevin Kiermaier returns after like a renaissance year last year with the Blue Jays. Great 1-year deal for the Blue Jays last year getting Kiermaier. He was spectacular defensively and a bit of a surprise offensively, like a lot better than a lot of people were expecting. They're going to ask him to do that again. And then their big Justin Turner as well, the other, like, I guess, premier guy that they signed. They bring him over from Boston. He's 39 years old. They're going to ask him to do it one more time
Yeah.
at 39. And then on the pitching side, Yariel Rodriguez was really like their marquee addition, and he's a Cuban right-hander who hasn't pitched in North America. He's only pitched in NPB. He's going to be a bit of a project. So anything they get from him this year is gravy. So really, it's like this year's more so a bet on internal improvement than anything that they brought in externally this offseason.
Justin Turner's interesting because you're right. Do it again. Like, that's the thing. Like, he's 39 years old. The guy's a professional hitter. He hits everywhere he goes. But at some point, Father Time's going to be like, nah, we're good. We're not doing this anymore. Like, I feel like it happened to Nelson Cruz. He kept going and kept going and kept going and probably went further than anybody said. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's not a gradual thing usually when that happens. When that happens, Father Time's like, you know, this is it, guys. You played for a long time. You're a really good hitter for a really long time. But that said, he doesn't look like he's slowing down that much. I mean, he's had a good spring. I'm looking at some of the numbers, and he's still hitting the ball hard. You had a good year last year, so nothing is to expect that he's not going to, you know, follow it up with another good season. So I think it's kind of an under the radar guy. He's just one of those dudes that always hits.
He has been in somewhat of a decline for several years now, but his decline has been more gradual rather than that cliff that you're describing. So it's probably not unreasonable to expect him to decline even a little bit from where he was with Boston last year. But if he could be that like 110, you know, Wade runs created plus, OPS plus, whatever your preferred stat is, if he can be that guy offensively, mostly DH, maybe fill in at third a little bit, you know, in a pinch, play a little second, maybe a little bit of first. I think the Blue Jays will be fine there if he's taking the kind of plate appearances that he's taken throughout his career, which are typically like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pitches, sometimes 9, like spoiling tough pitchers' pitches, making, you know, battling, making guys work, showing everybody on the bench what a pitcher is throwing, making a guy sweat and expend a bunch of pitches. You know, if he makes an out, he wants it to be a hard earned out for the pitcher. He doesn't want to get out on a pitcher's pitch on, you know, the second pitch of a plate appearance. So if he can bring a bit of that presence, bring a bit of his, you know, really renowned performance in clutch situations, late and close, extra innings, obviously his postseason track record speaks for itself. Like, if he can come up in some big spots for the Blue Jays, they'll be really pleased with that. It was one of the reasons why, like, this team wasn't better offensively last year. You look at like batting average, OBP, Wade runs created plus, all that stuff. The Blue Jays are like top 7 to 8 in baseball, but you look at runs scored, they are 14th last year, maybe 13th, and that's because like they did not come through enough with runners in scoring position. They did not come through enough when it counted. Some of that's luck, some of that like is just sequencing, some of that's just the whims of baseball, but it's an area where the Blue Jays just need to be better in 2024, because it's hard to imagine that, you know, their pitching is going to be as healthy and dependable again this year as it was in 2023.
So Joey Votto was another guy that signed minor league deal, hometown guy, right? Is there what's the thought about him coming in and any kind of contributions? Because obviously he still has the itch to play. He's one of the best personalities in baseball. So I'm happy he's still, selfishly, I'm happy he's still, you know, around the game and playing. Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, you know, he's coming in on a minor league deal and he's taking it extremely literally. Like, he's describing himself as a non-roster player. Like, he's talking about a willingness to go to AAA or AA and to have to earn his way in. Like, he didn't show up at camp with any kind of like presumptions or preconceived notions. Like, he showed up, he took the number the Blue Jays assigned to him. He's wearing number 37 because that's what the Blue Jays had. And he didn't demand the number 19. His locker is amongst the minor leaguers in the Blue Jays clubhouse. Like, he's you know, he's playing on the road when they have like they had a split squad game the other day. They had one game at home and one on the road. He made the road trip. It wasn't a crazy road trip or anything. It was just Clearwater, but didn't stay at home. Like, he is coming in with the mindset of, I'm a minor leaguer. I have to earn this. I'm coming off of 2 really challenging seasons, both physically and performance wise. I have to prove it that I'm still that guy at 40. And he kind of, you know, he said to us, like, I might stink. He said, I doubt it, but I might stink. So he's, you know, he has come in with the mindset of somebody who is, you know, just has to basically make a team. Like, in his words, he is trying out for the Blue Jays. So it's been kind of cool to watch a likely future Hall of Famer go through that process.
I love that. I mean, I expect nothing less from him and the way that his personality comes across. Like, he definitely feels like that type of guy who's just gonna make sure that he's a grinder in the moment. He's not gonna make a big deal of himself, come in, kind of fall into the situation. I kind of love that. He's one of my favorite players across the league, just following. So again, I do hope he makes the team and is able to contribute with you guys. Let's talk about that lineup. Springer, Bichette, Vlad, Turner, probably the first four, if I'm correct. Are you concerned at all about the top of that lineup? Is there concern about George Springer, continuing to, maybe not be the exact player you thought was there, because there was a little bit of a decline last year? Just what are your thoughts on that top four, and then into the rest of it? Because Isaiah Kiner-Falefa being the everyday third baseman, we saw him over here. Obviously, he was a super utility guy. He played the outfield when spoken. Like, I love the player because he will do anything. He's a team guy. He goes out there, doesn't complain. Will play at any position. And third base, that's where he won the Gold Glove. Like, he's the guy defensively, can chop it up over there with anyone. It's more about the consistency with the bat.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you're not counting on Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to be like an above average offensive contributor. You're counting on him to do like exactly what you just said, right? Play anywhere, move around. He'll play some different positions with the Jays. It won't be just third. Like, you'll probably see him at second. He might run out to a corner outfield every now and then. I think his catching days are well behind him, but the Blue Jays will definitely like maximize his versatility and try to get him into advantageous matchups. Like, they've got a bunch of guys in that kind of utility second base, third base, corner outfield role with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Kevin Biggio and Davis Schneider and Ernie Clement. So there's going to be a bit of rotation there. As far as like the top of the lineup, I think your primary concern is just health and availability when you're talking about, George Springer, as you said, like getting into his mid 30s, and somebody who has dealt with injuries in the past. Justin Turner being 39, like, you were just hopeful that those guys stay healthy and available. Even Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's been banged up the last couple of years, has played through it, but it has impacted his performance. Some of the like injuries he's been playing through, and he's had a couple of nagging ones in this camp. So first of all, it's availability. And then from there, you're counting on a George Springer to just get back to something approaching what he was prior to being a Blue Jay. Like, with his final few years in Houston, like, the Blue Jays just haven't seen that peak George Springer at all since he's been a Blue Jay. They've seen it in flashes, but he's dealt with injuries in between as well. Last season, 23 was really the first like full healthy season he's had with the Blue Jays. He led the team in plate appearances, but he had like a 104 WRC plus, which is just not George Springer-esque. So the Blue Jays are counting on a bounce back there in terms of productivity, and they hope that the availability continues to be there. And then with Vlad, they're also hoping for somebody who can get back to what he was 2 years ago, like 2021, when he was an MVP finalist. His numbers have declined appreciably since then. It's been a little bit maddening because you sort the baseball savant leaderboards, exit velo, hard contact, like quality of contact. Like, Vlad's up there with like your Shoheis and your Mookie Bettses and your Olsons and your Freemans and some of the best players in the game. It just hasn't really converted into results. So this is a pretty important year for Vlad. Like, Vlad and Bo both 2 years away from free agency now. So it is getting, push is kind of coming to shove with their futures, with the organization, as incredible as it is to say that for a couple of guys who are just in their mid-20s.
Are the questions starting to get tougher for those guys? Are you starting and you're, the rest of the beat, like, really starting to press, like, understanding that the importance of this year? Like you said, they're personally getting close to free agency, but the losing Ohtani, or not getting Ohtani, not even losing him, but not getting Ohtani in the offseason. Now the reliance really on these guys getting over that hump with the postseason performances that have happened. There's got to be a lot more pressure. Are they feeling that pressure? Are they talking about that pressure? And is there a sense of urgency for that offense to kind of be the engine of this team?
You've heard Bo Bichette talk about it quite a bit this camp. He's taken on a bit more of a leadership role. Like, he's really kind of coming into his own as a ball player. Like, the production has been pretty unquestionable for him over the last couple of years. And I know he thinks, and like, I kind of agree with him, that like there's another level in there, and that like he can even like take it a step further than where he's been offensively. A guy who's also made like tremendous defensive strides throughout his big league career. Somebody who, coming into the league, everyone thought like a guy who was eventually going to have to move to second base. And nobody's really saying that anymore because he's turned himself into a playable shortstop. He's not, Andrelton Simmons or anything, but like he's totally playable as an everyday shortstop, and the bat speaks for itself. So, Bo's been talking about a lot of those things you're referring to, like this, like we gotta, it's enough talk. We got to go out there and do it. Like we got to show that we're what we believe we are, what a lot of people have believed that we are. So, ultimately, like the results are going to be what dictates all of this. As far as like the future of Vlad and Bo with the organization, like those questions have gotten definitely tougher for the front office because you haven't won with this, these two like generational young superstar talents, like perennial all-stars, like, in Vlad's case, an MVP candidate, in Bo's case, one of the better young shortstops in the game. Like you haven't won with either of these two players, and you have 2 more years of contractual control. You haven't extended either of them, and the closer a player gets to free agency, the less likely he is to sign an extension. So, there is there's a bit of a pivot point. There's a decision to be made for the Blue Jays with both of those guys sometime within the next 24 months.
All right, let's flip to the other side here. Talk about some pitching. Returning a good core of the group here. Gosman anchoring the rotation. Berrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, who had a rebound year last year. I think that was. I didn't expect it. I don't know if it was expected up there or just a very pleasant surprise from Kikuchi. Then the 5th spot, Manoah's down, hurt. Who knows what the hell to expect from him? Honestly, after last year, looks like Francis is going to be probably starting the season in that 5th spot. But yeah, talk about the rotation and just the confidence level of these guys.
Well, and Kevin Gosman could be down to start the season as well. Like he's had a shoulder issue throughout camp, and he's very quickly trying to ramp up here. But we got about a week left. He hasn't been in a game yet. He's only had side sessions, and he's going to have a sim game here this week on March 20th. So we'll see if he's going to be ready for opening day. It's starting to look kind of unrealistic in that like he might have to miss the first turn or two in the rotation. So that would without Manoah, who is definitely not going to be ready for opening day, like you're now down to Berrios, Chris Bassett, Kikuchi, as you said, Bowden Francis was slot in there, and then likely some variation of a bullpen day in the 5th spot, which is not necessarily how you want to start your season, running a bullpen day regularly. But Mitch White would be a big part of that. Maybe pitching behind a Trevor Richards, or maybe getting a straight start, but not somebody who's going to be taking a 3rd trip through the lineup. So like it's interesting. The Blue Jays had such a strong pitching staff in 2023. Like the rotation was just absolutely like the bedrock of their team. Like they in Gosman, Berrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, like they had 4 guys who all made over 30 starts, like well over 160 innings. I mean, Bassett threw 200. Berrios also had a massive bounce back. If you remember his 2022, like he just got back to being the guy that he was earlier in his career. So it was, that really drove the Blue Jays with their pitching in 2023. And now they're kind of entering 2024 with some question marks in terms of health and, just whether they can repeat that durability and that quality of performance that they had in 2023. It's a hard thing to do 2 years in a row, to have that many innings, that much performance concentrated in so few pitchers. The Blue Jays are going to need to utilize their organizational pitching depth more in 24 than they did in 23. And it sort of remains to be seen if that's going to stand up to the test.
So Manoah, I want to key on just 2 guys because I think our audience is probably not as familiar with Francis, so interested to hear more about him. But Manoah too, like what I understand, he's kind of banged up right now, but let's say he's perfectly healthy in a month and he's ready to start pitching. What's the expectation for him at this point? Ever since, like you mentioned it, what was it, 2022 when he was Cy Young finalist? Like the guy was had a hell of a year, and then last year just completely went off the rails. What is the expectation for a healthy Alex Manoah?
Yeah, it's like the such polar opposite seasons, because in 22 he was one of the best pitchers in the American League, and then in 2023 is one of the worst. And so it's like so hard to say like what the expectation should be for him in 2024. Like the first things first, the Blue Jays need to get him off a mound and need to get him healthy and effective and feeling good. He made 1 start this spring before he dealt with the shoulder issue, and it was encouraging because like his velocity was back up it had been down in 23, and he showed that velocity again in that first start of spring. And he also showed a bite on his slider that was absent for much of 23, and which is why he had so much trouble putting hitters away in 23. He could get to 2 strikes on guys, no problem, but he was having trouble either striking them out or, getting them to hit a ground ball. Like a lot of hitters were just spoiling pitches against him and getting deeper into counts. He would go from 0-2 to 3-2, spoil a couple pitches, walk a guy. Now he's in trouble, hang a slider, give up a bomb. Like it was that sort of thing because the stuff just didn't have the snap and the bite to it. So he showed a flash of that earlier this spring, but then had the shoulder issue set him back a little bit. So they're going to want to get him back on a mound. And yeah, I'm sure they're going to utilize the entirety of a minor league rehab assignment just to make sure that, he is where he needs to be before he's back to the big league level here in 2024. So his start to the season is going to be delayed, but yeah, I'd be lying if I said I knew like what to expect from him once he does get to the big leagues in 2024, because the results have been just so disparate over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and mechanically, is that where this lies? Like you're saying the snap's not there on the ball. Like physically, obviously the shoulder currently, but is this a mechanical issues that he ran into last year and then just got so far down the line that he couldn't recover from it? Like what are the scouts and the coaches thinking that is the issue with him and why he's not able to bounce back?
Yeah, there were some physical issues in 2023. His conditioning was not where it needed to be coming into that season, and he had trouble repeating his release point and his delivery. He had a really inconsistent tempo down the mound, and he never got synced up. Like he never got to a consistent, repeatable, comfortable place when he's in the big leagues. It's part of the reason why he got demoted mid-season, and the Blue Jays didn't demote him from the majors to AAA. They demoted him down to the Florida Complex League,
Right.
like as far down as you can go, because the Blue Jays wanted him to report to Dunedin, Florida, where they have their player development complex, and like get in their pitching lab and just collect some information and get on the Edgertronic and the Rapsodo and figure out exactly what's going on here with his delivery, his biomechanics, like the way he's moving on the mound. They felt like they found some things in that process, but correcting those things, like that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't even happen in a month, right? It takes months and an entire off season to correct some of those things. And Alek Manoah had a better off season. Like he came into camp in better condition this year, and the velo was there his first time out. The mechanics were synced up. Like things felt better, looked better. The Blue Jays were encouraged. And then unfortunately the shoulder thing happened. So we'll see how he looks when he comes back. There is just so much uncertainty there. And I don't think, the Blue Jays are counting on Alek Manoah to be, a big innings hauler in their rotation. I think if they get like a number 5 starter from him this year, right? If they get 140, 150 innings of like a 4.2 ERA, I think they'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And Francis, I mean, who knows? I mean, is there an expectation where he takes this job and really runs with it? I mean, does he have that upside for the club to feel good about, where if he's going and Manoah becomes healthy, that, maybe there isn't a rotation spot, understanding that throughout the process of a season, it's difficult to maintain the full rotation, as you guys did, like you mentioned, but it's a difficult thing to do. So if Francis is going, and there's not a rotation spot, that's just a place that they're going to keep him in, and Manoah, they'll figure it out, put him in a spot, keep the rehab going. How do they handle that?
I'm sure an opportunity will present itself, as it always does, right? Like these things always take care of themselves.
They do. They take care of themselves.
Very seldom that a team is like, we have too many good pitchers. We don't know how to use all of them. With Francis, like he's been a great story in this camp for the Jays. Like they love the way that he's come in. He's had a ton of intent, and he's shown velocity and really good breaking stuff like throughout his outings. Like he's one of the more stoic, composed guys you're going to see on the mound. Like he can give up a 3-run bomb or strike out the side, and he looks like the same guy either way. And he was in a bit of a thankless role for the Blue Jays last season. Like they used all 5 of his options. He was up and down from Buffalo to Toronto, and he was pitching out of the bullpen and honestly like covering for, some of the instances when Manoah wasn't as reliable as the Blue Jays had hoped that he would be. But he's come into this camp like firing 96, 97 with a hammer of a breaking ball and working on a splitter that the Blue Jays are confident could be more of a weapon against lefties. So he's going to get his opportunity to pitch out of this rotation at the start of the season, and he has like earned it in every way. It's a guy who was outright off the roster just a couple of years ago, going through some velocity issues himself, and went down similar process to what Manoah went through. Went down to the Blue Jays pitching lab in Dunedin. They figured out some biomechanical stuff, some delivery stuff, refined some of those inefficiencies. He was able to get that velocity back, that command back, and has really made just some strides, I think, in his mentality and his intent on the mound. So it's going to be interesting to see, what it looks like when we get to real regular season competition, and it's not just these spring training games that he's been excelling in so far.
And what about down in the farm? I mean, you guys have a left-handed kid, right? That's a top prospect. Does he looks like he's starting in AAA, but does he factor into the rotation at some point?
Ricky Tiedemann, and the Blue Jays hope that he factors into the rotation. If he had been healthy last year, he probably has already made his big league debut, but he had some injury stuff come up in 23 and ended up only throwing, somewhere around 65, 70 innings. It was, a disappointing result, but the stuff is electric, one of the top left-handed pitching prospects in baseball. And, there's been a lot of top pitching prospects in baseball that didn't become anything at the big league level. There's no such thing as a pitching prospect, but the Blue Jays feel really strong about him, feel he's just like a really gifted kid. I mean, he's still only 21 years old, and he has shown great composure on the mound, and he has shown like really natural, easy stuff, 96, 97 from the left side, wicked slider, the change up that, is kind of come and gone a little bit. Like, it's such a field pitch. It's tough to always have it. But when he has all three working, like, he is a handful, and, his strikeout numbers in the minor leagues are through the roof for those reasons. So like you said, he'll go to AAA. He'll try to get into just a consistent routine and just pitch regularly and build a bit of that innings base. And if things are going well through the first month or two of the regular season, I do think you'll see him up with Toronto before long, because they feel really highly about his stuff and his ability to get big league hitters out.
Confidence in the bullpen, obviously, with the 5 spot kind of in flux, and early in the season with Gaussman being down, the bullpen, as you mentioned, maybe there's a day early in the season in April where, there is a bullpen day. You guys had strong performance last year, brought pretty much everybody back, right? Hicks, I think, is the only guy that isn't coming back. Signed Chad Green again. You have a good anchor in the pen. So you got to feel confident, I would assume, walking in with the bullpen depth that you have right now.
I felt more confident until, prior to this morning, when we learned that Jordan Romano is dealing with some elbow inflammation, and Eric Swanson, is dealing with a little bit of forearm tightness.
Man, forearm is connected to the elbow.
It's all connected in there. So, more confident before, the two guys right at the back end of this bullpen were dealing with injury concerns, but they've both gone for MRIs, which returned nothing structural. So the hope is it's just like some inflammation, and just you take a couple days to get that sorted out, cortisone shots, all the treatment that they can apply, and those guys are good to go. Assuming that they are, the Blue Jays feel good about their bullpen with those two, with your guy Chad Green, who's going to be coming off Tommy John. Like, he's going to soak up a lot of those innings that were lost via Jordan Hicks, as you mentioned, and Jay Jackson played a big part of this bullpen last year. He's with Minnesota now. The Blue Jays see Chad Green as like that 80 inning guy that he was with the Yankees, right? Like, multiple inning outings, back to backs, like, can really use him to soak up a lot of leverage and not necessarily just 3 outs of it. So they feel good about having him in the fold. And then, Jimmy Garcia is the guy who just like doesn't get talked about a lot, but who is like that 6th, 7th inning guy who is really reliable, throws really hard, throws a bunch of different pitches, just kind of takes the ball whenever you ask him to, and does his thing. You could kind of put Trevor Richards into that conversation as well, as a bit of a thankless guy who has really good results in the bullpen, although he's kind of had his struggles this spring. So we'll see. Bullpens are so volatile. You never feel good kind of predicting performance year after year. It's almost like if it was good the year before, you almost expect maybe there to be some hiccups the year afterwards. So, we'll see. But as always, it's a live thing, a bullpen, right? Like, the way it looks on opening day is probably pretty different than how it's going to look at the end of the season. So it's like I said earlier, this season's going to be all about the pitching depth for the Blue Jays and showing that they can produce some capable MLB starters and relievers internally just to get past the inevitable hiccups that they're going to face.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, we were just talking about our bullpen as well, and like this is the first year in a long time that there's a lot of unproven guys that are going to be most likely starting, opening day in the bullpen, and that's just not something that we've been used to completely as Yankees fans. We've had that 6, 7, 8, 9 guy, for such a long time that it's you expect someone to take that turn, both probably down and up, because like you said, it's a volatile part of the team, and usually someone will surprise you in one direction, and then someone will surprise you in another direction, and it kind of figures it out as it's going. So last thing I wanted to hit on was just the rest of the farm system. Anybody else besides Tiedemann that was coming up that could be a player this year, a contributor? Is there anyone that you're looking at with a special eye, saying like, hey, that could be a guy that gives us a jolt at some point during the season?
One name to know is Aurelvis Martinez. Like outside
Yep.
of Tiedemann, he's the only other top 100 prospect that the Blue Jays have right now. And he's 21, 22 years old. He's going to start at AAA this year, and he's just got like as much power as anyone in the minor leagues. But he's also had like as much chase and swing and miss over the last couple of years as well. So that's like been a big focus for him, has just been being more selective, making better swing decisions, not offering at pitches off the plate, and waiting for the mistakes that he can absolutely crush. Like this is a guy who like has routinely had like 28 homers per like minor league season throughout his time in the Blue Jays system. Like these are in minor league seasons, and this is like a 21, 22-year-old. He's got as much raw power as anybody. But there's been a lot of prospects that have a ton of raw power that can't hang around in the big leagues, because big league pitchers are really good at getting you to chase and aren't going to throw you anything to hit if you show that you will expand and you will go off the plate. Even in the minors, like Elvis got to a point where he was seeing more breaking balls than fastballs, because like the book was out on him, the scouting report was out. So if he can make those adjustments and those refinements, like he could be a dude at second base, third base that you see this year for the Blue Jays. But yeah, him and Tiedemann are really like the two big ones to keep an eye on. I mean, I don't know if you want to put Yariel Rodriguez in this conversation, but like coming over from Cuba, hasn't pitched in North America. He's like a super funky delivery with a bunch of hesitations at different arm slots, but it's mid-90s heater that moves in a bunch of different directions. Like it's a few different fastballs and some pretty good high spin breaking stuff as well. But Rodriguez is going to be a little bit of a project for the Blue Jays this year. Like in his contract, they actually have like a minor league option on him this year, even though he's on a big league deal and an international free agent. So, he's going to be at AAA, like working on some things, refining his delivery, probably paring down the pitch mix a little bit, and just learning how to pitch in North America, because it's different, right? NPB is so contact oriented. You pitch a lot differently than here against, North American hitters who are much more trying to hit for power and trying to, park balls in the seats. That changes your sequencing, and that changes the areas of the zone that you attack in. So that'll be a bit of a process. But yeah, those would be the three names for the minor leagues to really keep an eye on. It's been a bit of a gap for the Blue Jays the last year, 18 months, where they haven't really graduated any impactful talent from the minors, since that Vlad, Kirk, Bo era. And it's been tough for them. Like it's made it hard for them to, replace some of the gaps that they've had when there's been injuries or underperformance at the big league level. It's something they need to do like a much better job of going forward, is developing and graduating talent from within, because the teams that don't do that consistently inevitably have to go through these cycles of being good and then being bad for a while. If you want to win sustainably, you just need to have talent coming up from within your minor league system, just to paper over the players that underperform, get injured, or leave in free agency.
Yeah, it's tough to do that too, especially when you're at a team in a team position where you are fighting for a wild card spot. You're not out of the mix. You're not able to make a midseason trade and capitalize on some of those things that teams that are competing need, so that you can kind of restack the system a bit. The Yankees made a decision back in 16. We were able to, we were fortunate to be able to make a move. So it's not a rebuild, but you're right. If you continue to do that and you're not pumping those prospects in, you're going to find some down years unless you're able to retool at some point. All right, man. Last question that is a little bit off the cuff here, but we're asking the guys who are covering each of the teams a bold prediction for the AL East this year. What are your thoughts? It doesn't have to be Toronto related, but what do you think is going to happen?
Just what my prediction is for how things are going to end up, or like a bold prediction people are expecting?
Anything that's interesting within the division. But also, how do you think things are going to shake out?
I mean, I think you could have 5 teams at 500 or better.
Yeah.
I don't think it's out of the question that the Red Sox finish 500 if they get, if Bayo takes the next step and Ceddanne Rafaela shows up and is really good, and maybe they sign a Jordan Montgomery, and I think they could be competitive. I think there's routes to them being competitive. The Yankees are going to be great. They should have been better last year, right? It's every year, people get way too down on teams that underperform the year prior and way too high on teams that overperformed the year prior, right? So if anything, people are probably too high on the Orioles right now and too low on the Yankees. I think those two teams are both really good and are both going to be battling it out for first place in this division. And then it's going to come down to, the Blue Jays and Rays battling for third place and in the wild card race as well. And if you're, the Blue Jays or Rays, you are hoping there isn't a surprise team in the Central, a Tigers or a Guardians or a Royals who show up and surprise the world. And you're really hoping that, one of Mariners, Rangers have a bunch of injuries or a bunch of underperformance and aren't good, because the wild card race could be, could get thick real quick with, some of the talent and some of the teams that could be entering that this year. The American League is going to be really good. The American League East, especially.
You're right about the Central. The Central is interesting because on the surface, you're looking at it and you're saying one team's going to come out of the Central, right? Whoever wins the bloodbath of the Central is gonna be the playoff team. But you never know, because there is that one surprise team that comes out. Whether it's Kansas City or Detroit, the young talent is there, and who knows if they're ahead of schedule with it and can start then to look at competing for a wild card, and that throws everything into the shuffle now for the East and the West. So cool, man. Well, look, I appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic year. Getting out of Florida next week, so safe travels and all of that. And we'll see you when the Yankees and the Blue Jays start competing.
Thanks, man. Can't wait.